Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on Fat Burning Man, where we help you look, feel, and perform at your best. Now, does being ripped and having a six-pack automatically make you more spiritual? At this point, you've probably heard of JP Sears, and contrary to popular belief, I found out he's a real person, and a pretty swell one at that. You've probably seen his satirical comedy videos all over the internet, skewering everything you hold dear. At this point, they have over 300 million views. If you haven't checked out any of his videos, please do, either before this interview, after this interview, or whenever you want. It's definitely worth taking a look and getting a good giggle out of it. But before we get to the interview, here's a review that's short and sweet for the Wild Diet that just came in on Amazon from North Carolina. Down 20 pounds in 6 weeks and have not been hungry. Well, geez, slam dunk. Nice, awesome. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. 20 pounds is definitely some serious progress. So thanks so much for putting what you've learned on this show and read in the book into action. And thanks for writing in and sharing your results with us. Now, if you are listening and you took your health into your own hands and you're feeling swell yourself, then I'd love to hear about it. So the easiest way to get in touch, I'm not great at social media, as we'll get into on this show, but the easiest way to get in touch is by visiting fatburningman.com. Make sure that you're signed up for the free newsletter. And when I send you a note, just hit reply to my email and let me know how you're doing. Send a comment, tell me your story. I read every single one, and I obviously can't respond to everyone, but I reply to as many as I can. So shoot me an email at abel@fatburningman.com, and I may even feature your story on this podcast in an email or on the blog, with your permission, of course. Now, in other news, my wife Allison and I recently returned from a month-long cross-country road trip / camping trip where we drove from Colorado to New Hampshire and back and recorded hundreds of 360 virtual reality adventure tours. I'll be releasing them on my new website, abeljames.com, in a brand spanking new 360 VR series we're calling Adventures with Abel. We've already toured the Badlands in South Dakota, recorded adorable baby bison and barking prairie dogs, even some bighorn sheep dangling from cliffs. In the videos, you'll also see a Yellowstone park ranger herding baby bison with his pickup truck. You can see boiling mud pots and erupting geysers. You can even see an elk mama nibbling on a geothermal hot spring. We'll also be releasing a few tours of Mount Evans with mountain goats, Serpent Mound in Ohio, the Great American Stonehenge, Mount Washington, the highest peak in the Northeast, and even the backwoods where I grew up, my favorite fishing spot. You can check out all of that and more with a new 360-degree VR with spatial audio video, totally crazy, for free, at abeljames.com. So that's ABEL James.com. Look forward to a brand new video every day for the next year. Since we're releasing it ourselves, totally free and free of outside advertising, and I hope you enjoy it. So if you'd like to support us, then please visit wildsuperfoods.com to get your own health boosting goodies. Those are the supplements that Allison and I take every day, or almost every day, and can't wait to hear how you like them. So anyway, on any device, just type in wildsuperfoods.com. Right now, we can only ship to the US, hopefully internationally soon. But check that out. And then, of course, you can get all of the write-ups and transcriptions of more than 250 of these shows for free at fatburningman.com. So check that out and make good use of that search bar. You'd be surprised at what you could find. All right, on to the show with JP. You're about to learn the real reason the carnivore diet is blowing up the internet, ayahuasca abuse in pseudo-spiritual circles, how your social media accounts are trying to control you, and tons more. Let's go hang out with JP. All right, folks, JP Sears is a comedian, YouTuber, emotional healing coach, and now the author of How to Be Ultra Spiritual, 12 and a half Steps to Spiritual Superiority. You've likely seen his satirical comedy videos all over the internet, which have over 300 million views. And for the first time ever on Fat Burning Man, hopefully not the last, please welcome His Enlightenedness, Mr. JP Sears.
Abel, thank you for having me on and for making me sound relatively astute in that intro. I appreciate you not sharing any of the devious shadow that I carry.
It was relatively challenging, but I do have a good first question for you. And considering your family name is now in shambles, how are you coping with the Sears bankruptcy these days?
Man, I just disown my family name. I think, I think the last name Sears, of course, I don't know, for 100 years, it's been like, ooh, cool, Sears and Roebuck. And now it's like, wow, y'all are going bankrupt.
Oops.
And of course, it's not my actual family that owns Sears, yet I think we can all agree that image is everything.
Right.
You know, the cover of the book is way more important than what's on the inside of the book. So
obviously.
And I think it was also time to change my name anyway, to like JP Karma Rainbow Unicorn or
internet friendly. Those are some good SEO terms.
I would think so. Or JP's. So, yeah, I think just disowning my family because I'm afraid that the family name might like hurt my image by 0.12%.
I would think so. Sears and spiritual don't seem to go together at all.
Yeah. So JP Karma Unicorn coming at you.
Welcome. The world debut. So we were talking before we started this interview about how I really appreciate what you're doing. In order to do good satire, you really do need to see things from both sides. So I would love for you to just explain that a little bit to the people who are listening, because sometimes, including myself, when you watch a video of yours, you can wind up a little bit confused.
Sure. And, if you, the beautiful listener, if you haven't seen any of my videos, just take a quick second to explain what I do. My videos, they quote unquote make fun of the spiritual world, the health world, nutrition world, exercise world, new age topics, the self-development world, as well as a few kind of social, call them issues, social justice warriors, millennials, things like that. And anything that I'm quote unquote making fun of, it's something that's important to me in my life. Mm-hmm. So, I'm making fun of spirituality. Well, my spiritual life is incredibly important to me. Making fun of functional fitness. I've been doing functional fitness since I was 18.
Yeah.
And so it's important to me to have one foot in the world that I'm doing satire on. But of course, one foot out of the world, like be able to step out of the world, have a sense of self outside of it, not just be self-identified with like, I'm a CrossFitter, I'm a meat eater, and,
right.
think I am the things that I do, so that I can have a little self-awareness and being able to have one foot in the world because it's important to me, and also one foot out of the world so I can see a little more objectively, if I can dare use that word. That helps me see the ridiculousness of the given world I'm doing satire on. And I think any world, any philosophy, practice, it will have ridiculousness around it. Yeah, probably great stuff as well, but also ridiculousness. So, and part of what I love to point out through the artistic satire of my comedy videos is how our egos will infiltrate anything we do, and our ego will try to gratify itself, make itself feel more significant through these otherwise noble looking things like exercise, spirituality, meditation. So I do my best to shine the light of awareness on how our ego likes to become egotistical in these worlds.
And you play it off so well, but most people are doing that to themselves without even realizing it, right? Like anytime you put a label on the way that you eat, for example, or the way that you exercise, what does that do to your psychology and your emotions? What does that do to you without realizing it? Now, and I'm speaking about the listener here.
Sure. Well, I tend to think that it's human nature to start to self-identify with what we do and what we believe. So, we see this, whether it's a religion, an eating practice, a way of exercising, and we start to confuse like my way is the only way and my way is me. So we start to think that who we are is what we're doing and what we're believing in. And I think that means that the beneficial thing that we're doing, it can be the thing that makes us start losing ourselves. Because, if someone's a vegan, like, cool, you're doing veganism, but you are more than a vegan. Like, that's not who you are. It's what you do. If you're a meat eater, like, that's not who you are. That's what you do. That's how you eat. But I think so many of us, I'm certainly guilty. I think all of us do this. The question isn't, do we do it? But how do we do it? Mm-hmm. We all lose ourselves into the things that are important to us, where we think like, hey, I have to defend veganism as though it's my, religion, because I think it's who I am. And if you start to see holes in veganism, then that threatens my sense of life, even though it doesn't threaten our life. But if we're self-identified with it, we think it does. So, we start to become willing to die for our beliefs and our practices. And I'm like, man, don't serve the beliefs. Don't serve the practices. Don't worship CrossFit. Let those things serve you. Mm-hmm. Realize you are beyond those things. And I also think there's a paradox. Anything that works for us will eventually start working against us if we stay rigidly attached to it. Mm-hmm. I have friends of mine. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Raw-Bras, Daniel Eisenman, Timothy Eisenman. So the three brothers, Daniel, Timothy, and Nathaniel, I don't know what it was, a handful of years ago, maybe a couple of handfuls of years ago, they started a YouTube channel because they started eating a raw vegan diet, and they were so stoked about it. So they had a very self-identified name. We are the Raw-Bras. Started the YouTube channel on that and built up a great following pretty quickly. But then the thing that was working for them, raw veganism, started to working against them. And it's not a knock on raw veganism. It's just like it worked for them and then it stopped working for them. And they were validating this through medical tests showing, like, I think it was Daniel, is like now I think it was 6 months into it, his testosterone was at the level of like an 80-year-old woman.
Wow.
Just not good.
Yeah.
So they said, well, let's try something different. Then they started eating meat and their health really bounced back and started accelerating. And
raw meat?
No, man, I've seen them eat raw fish, but not raw meat. But anyway, that was for me, that's just an example of how something worked for a person and then started working against them. And luckily, these friends of mine, the Raw-Bras, they weren't willing to die for the cause. Yeah. They realized, like, I am more than a raw vegan, so raw veganism isn't working for me anymore. So let me let that fade away, find something that serves me better. So anyway, I think that's an example of an example that we can all relate to in one way or another.
And it's a great example of how it plays out a lot of the times, whether it's paleo, vegan, keto, or anything like that. People eventually get to this point where they're just like, it's not worth it anymore, unless, you want to seriously be that one label for the rest of your existence, which I can't imagine. That's being a slave to your label, isn't it?
Unfortunately, I think you're right. And I think the miracle of who you are, the miracle of who anybody is, you are way bigger, way more magnificent than a practice, a philosophy, a way of eating, a way of living. You are more than that. You really are. And I think we make ourselves very limited if we try to stay in the narrow lane of like, I am the meat eater, I am the carnivore, I am the paleo, I am the vegan, I am the Buddhist. So, but at the same time, when something works for us, and like that's something, the paleo, it might work for you for a year, it might work for you for 10 years. And it feels so I think, scary for us to betray the thing that worked for us.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, eating paleo really worked for me for a season. But then if it starts to work against me, we can completely ignore that because we're attached to the past.
Yeah.
We're living in 2005 when it was still working for us. And because it worked for us, then we're tattooing that memory into the forefront of our present consciousness and refusing to see what's in front of us because we're only focusing on what was behind us. Like, it worked for me then. So we hypnotize ourselves into believing, well, it'll automatically work for me now and forevermore. Yet, I don't think so. I mean, I think everything has a shelf life.
Yeah.
And as we grow and expand, the things that worked well for us won't serve us anymore. It's like when you started lifting weights, and I'll speak from my experience. When I started lifting weights, it was everything I could do to bench press the bar.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being like 11 years old, seeing people bench like 45s. I'm like, I'll probably start with that. But then I start with the bar and I could barely do it, 45 pounds. But that was a good, challenging place for me to start. That bar worked for me. But if I stayed attached to the bar and refused to let myself evolve and grow, and like, the bar doesn't work anymore, I need something heavier. Now I need 25s. Now I need 35s on each side. Now 45s. That my fitness would have been greatly challenged, greatly restricted if I didn't allow myself to grow and evolve. And just real quick, I'll throw one example. You can be in the ocean, shipwreck, scary scenario, but you've got a life preserver. That life preserver is going to work for you for a while. And then after a while, I don't know what it is, a matter of days or weeks, that life preserver is going to become waterlogged. And keeping it on, it basically means you're wearing a vest of concrete. However, we can be there in the ocean still stranded and thinking like, I'm not going to let go of this life preserver because it kept me afloat, refusing to experience the new reality of the evolved situation where the life preserver that worked for us is now working against us. So, man, I think us as people, we deserve to let ourselves be unattached from what worked for us. Like, let those things serve us so that we can let them go and evolve, go on to the next thing that will work better for us.
Is there anything along those lines that you're working on in your own life right now or have recently?
No, I'm pretty perfect at the moment, Abel. I'm just like trying to relate to other people who have their struggles. Yeah, man, very much so. I mean, where do I begin? One place to begin is, the past 4 years, I've been incredibly blessed to have my comedy videos really blow up and open so many amazing doors. And before I was doing the comedy videos, I was doing life coaching for 15 years, real sincere messages and working with people and teaching classes. So, actually starting back then, life coaching, since only being sincere, I let myself evolve beyond that to like, let's do comedy videos too. That was a dramatic change. I had to let go of I am the sincere life coach. Now I'm more than that. I'm the sincere life coach and I'm a comedian. And now fast forward like 4 years into the comedy, which I still love the comedy, that's still working for me. Yet I feel the evolution going beyond it, where now it's important to me to bring back sincere messages, whether I'm lacing them with comedy or not. And I abandoned just the purely sincere messages 4 years ago. So now as I'm, I wouldn't say going back to them, but evolving to a place where I've been through this comedic world for 4 years, had it opened up so many doors, that's worked so well for me. But if I stay in it, I think it's going to confine me. So I'm finding new ways to express my sincere messages. And one way that takes shape is, if a company hires me to come in and speak or speak at the conference and they say, JP, will you come do comedy for us? I'll say, yes. And can I also give a sincere message? Because that's me. That's where I'm at. They'll say, yeah, that's awesome. And I've got my membership program. And my podcast. I mentioned to you before we started, Abel, I started the Awaken with JP Sears show, launched it about 3 weeks ago. That is not a comedy podcast. You know, though I'll be myself, so my humor comes in, but it's very unapologetically sincere, deep diving discussions, heart to heart with other people. And that was me feeling the urge, I've got to go beyond this comedy that's working for me. I got to let my expression get bigger than that, because I feel the urge. So did I halfway answer the question?
Yeah.
I'm getting all excited here. I feel like I'm having a therapy session.
Of course. But it is important to talk about those separate worlds, isn't it? Because comedy, and I did musical comedy in Austin for years, it becomes its own toxic little world if you stay in that, right? If people are only comedians and they only do comedy and you're only ripping on everything all the time, then that itself can be a toxic rabbit hole. In the same way that you were talking about, if people are raw vegan for too long, or if it's not serving them anymore, sometimes you need to branch out of that. And it sounds like what you're doing is really integrating with what you had abandoned before to some degree. Because for me, I could totally relate to that. When I started this show, I was to some degree frustrated by the lack of progress in art that I was seeing, even in Austin, Texas, which should have been this, mecca. But instead I saw, real music being kicked out by iPhones and iPads and all of this kind of like soulless schlop. And I'm like, ugh, but I have more I need to give to the world. And so I shut off playing live gigs for almost 2 years, after playing like 200 plus for many years, every year, and started this show. And then this kind of blew up and became big. And then I became that, I thought, in my mind. But that's toxic if it's only that. And so it's been really fun and interesting over the past few years, really integrating all those different pieces. Because once you can see the similarities between you being sincere and you ripping on, these movements and whatever the internet fad of the moment is, once you start integrating all those things, I think there's a lot of wisdom that comes with that, isn't there?
I think so. And to me, it's the wisdom of holistic consciousness.
Yeah.
Because just like the body, you can take a look at one thing like the liver. Cool. The liver unto itself can become very toxic, not help us detox, but it would be a source of toxicity if it stays as its own entity. But when the liver is connected to the colon, the urinary system, the cardiovascular system, like, okay, now the body can excrete these toxins that the liver has detoxed instead of the liver reconverting them into a toxic form. So, once upon a time, we focused on developing the liver, the heart, and then putting these pieces together into a whole. We all know the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think it's like that with areas of our lives. And I think it can be scary, because when we get good at doing the liver, when you get good at doing the music, that becomes a comfort zone. But I think both growth and happiness depend on us leaving our comfort zone. And sometimes that comfort zone is saying, like, now I've got to integrate the music into something new, musical comedy, or I've got to integrate the comedy into something else or with something else, which is scary because we've never done it before. It's tempting to succumb to the siren songs of the comfort zone and stay there because it's comfortable. But before too long, we realize we're living in the coffin of our comfort zone. So I think integrating, going into uncharted territory, bringing the parts of ourselves together, our interests together, is part of the call. And I think that's part of becoming a whole being, living a holistic life.
Yet today, in the age of Instagram, it does seem that almost everyone has their own little mini celebrity going on, their own little myopic image of themselves that's transmitted to the world that they must then become a slave to, right? So we're in the world at large, and I think this has happened to some degree invisibly, but I'm like, wait a second, like my parents have many celebrity accounts on social media that are interacting with mine now, and this is tripping me out, and it's tripping them out, it's tripping everyone out, because we're more than our social media accounts, but we don't always feel that way, do we?
100%. And, we get validated for who we are. We don't get validated for who we're becoming because nobody knows that yet.
Yeah.
So they can't validate who we're in the process of becoming. And typically when we become it, we've got to own it for a while before it can really express itself and other people can recognize it. So yeah, I definitely hear that. If you become the Instagram star because I've got the amazing glutes, then you I am that. I've got to maintain that image because that's what's giving me approval. But then let's just say you're that woman and you want to start a family, but you don't want to have a family because your body might be misshaped for a while or forever. So you're scared about that. So you start maybe I'll just not let that natural desire of mine to start a family be a part of my life because I'm afraid of losing this mini celebrity kind of thing. But I think part of the recipe for growth and evolvement is betray two things. Betray who we were. We got to betray who we were in order to let ourselves become not only who we are, but also become who we're going to be. Because I think we're just like the universe is always expanding. I think we are that as well. The macrocosm is found in the microcosm. So I think we are always in the process of expanding and becoming more, or at least realizing that we're becoming more. I don't think, I found myself. Cool, you found yourself in that moment, but next month you're going to be more than that.
Right.
And then I also, the other sense that I think we need to betray in order to be true to ourselves and have a successful life is we have to betray who we think other people think we are. So we look at the Instagram account and whatever our profile is, and we see people commenting. So we get a sense of this is who they think I am. And sometimes we start to become more true to that than we are to ourselves. So I think a willingness to betray who they think we are is essential. It's scary to live, 100%. And it is very fulfilling, very rewarding, very expansive to do.
Yeah, it's really easy. Not that we're in advanced age, but it's easy for the 3-4 years to go by without thinking that they've even gone by, without thinking perhaps I should evolve or change my thinking about certain things. We're playing the same character, but if you just go back to high school, for example, it's the difference between freshman year JP and senior year JP. I mean, that's only the same 3 or 4 years, right? But at the same time, think about all the growth that has happened during that time, hopefully. And why can't we continue that throughout the rest of our lives? And why can't we continue that way of thinking that every year, every month, every day, every moment, we should be evolving, maybe not striving, but hopefully moving on some trajectory, perhaps away from who we used to be, toward that wholeness that you were speaking about.
Oh, I love that thought. And I just think back to my old thinking, and maybe some other people still have this thinking, who knows, but the old thinking is kind of once you're 18, you stop physically growing. Therefore it's easy to trick ourselves into believing that we're not growing.
Yeah.
Just because we're not physically growing. And it's almost that's when our psyches, our hearts, that's when the real growth starts. When we leave home, when we, leave the schools, and it's now we're in this thing called my life. Holy Lord, now's when the growth spurt really starts. And I think that's exciting. And I think you're right. We don't recognize that enough. Because it's the growth is happening in this invisible realm called our mind, heart, and our psyche. So it's easy to pretend it's not there because we can't see it. And I think that's a trick our human minds play on us. It says, well, if I can't see something, then it's not there.
Yeah.
And I was whoa, maybe
that's brainwashing.
Exactly. We need to do some soul washing of our brainwashing.
Yeah, let's do some soul washing. I like that. But being trapped in that freshman character is kind of where a lot of people are, especially on the internet with social media and all of that, getting wrapped up in keto, carnivore diet. Let's go right there. What's your take on the carnivore diet that's just overwhelming the internet these days with its awesomeness?
What causes me to put the brakes on the most is it's trendy. It's the new thing. And, you hear some of the guests.
It's not the new thing for cats.
So, anything that people are doing because it's trendy is, to me, it's let's be cautious about that. Like, the wisdom of your body isn't a slave to social trends. Yeah. So I'm not saying like it's not going to work for you, but I'm just saying it won't work for you just because you think it's trendy and awesome and it's the newest, therefore most exciting thing. And, it's at one of the ends of the extremes. And I think, oftentimes the sweet spot is the place of balance in between the extremes.
Half year carnivore, half year raw vegan.
Exactly. Now on balance. And I think, P.S. I'm not an expert on any of this. I'm just someone who barely has opinions. So here come just a few opinions.
You have opinions. They're more than barely.
Listening to some of the folks, the Rhonda Patricks, the Dom DiAgostinos, Chris Kressers, a lot of folks like that. What the reverence I have for something like the carnivore diet is its medical applications to help people for a specific therapeutic amount of time. Right. And I know keto, obviously keto is not as extreme, but keto has great medical applications. Yeah. Raw juice cleanses have incredible medical applications. Yeah. So taking a therapeutic application and making that a permanent fixture in one's life is something that I think needs to be that we need to be mindful of that. Yeah. I'm all about experimenting, but part of any experiment is paying attention to the results and the feedback. Yeah. It's like get extreme as you want, yet have the respect and reverence for your body to listen to the results of the experiments. But I'm curious to turn that question back to you, Abel. Your thoughts on, for example, the latest trend, the carnivore diet.
Well, I think, like you said, there's definitely a trend toward the extremes, especially on the internet these days, and you can turn these little cliques into communities, but artificially. And what people don't realize is how many of these trends are coming from the top down. They're coming from people who are not in health. They're coming from marketers. They're coming from people who are in this to make money. They're in, and if you type in anything health related onto the internet these days, 80% of it, I feel pretty comfortable saying, is going to be marketing hype, because those are the people who are holding the cash. Those are the people who are, running the internet, which to some degree has become our outsourced brain, right? Like we don't really read books anymore. Even if we do go to school, we're on our iPads or what have you. And so the internet is our external brain. And one thing that I'm really concerned about, because there's nothing wrong with the carnivore diet, especially for cats or for animals that it's appropriate for. I don't think there's anything wrong with not eating vegetables or plant matter for a while, whether you're fasting or you're just eating meat and you're trying to do a reset. I think it's really important to find the edges of whatever you're doing so that you can find your way back to the sweet spot eventually. What people do, though, too often, I think, is drink a little bit too much of that Kool-Aid from the marketers. They think it's from the health people, but it's from the marketers. They drink the Kool-Aid and they're like, I'm a carnivore now. And they become they don't really realize it, but they're an ambassador for that trend now. And so they're doing the marketing for the marketers who are just crushing it. For sure. But that all happens quite invisibly, and it's kind of snuck up on us in the past 4 or 5 years, I think, as social media has really changed and enveloped our lives and emotions, and the internet as well. So I think there are, like you studied with Paul Chek, for example, there are certain people, there are certain ways of thinking about food, many of them Eastern, not new at all, that are the pillars of healthy eating and living that you should always go back and re-examine, like eating your vegetables. So when you say, like, not eating vegetables is the healthiest, newest thing, I'm just waiting for a JP Sears video about it. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things that's not okay. Like, we need to think more before we hop on these trends, is what I would say.
Yeah, you know, by the way, the carnivore diet is definitely on my list of videos to do. Just grandma telling you, you got to eat your vegetables. And now we look at vegetables like they're junk food. Like, of course, to be healthy, you can't eat your vegetables.
I was bad today. I ate a carrot. One of those things. Like, that's people so guilting disgusting. Themselves for eating spinach. Kale got trendy. It got too trendy. That's how you know kale got too trendy.
It did. But now, here's an interesting angle, and I might have to work this into the video. I think feel like we're in a creative brainstorm right now.
Let's do it.
People, you know, what eating like an omnivore diet, you get away from that. Now we're at the extreme of the carnivore diet. It's like, hey, you know, we're carnivores, we're eating flesh, we're made out of flesh. Then the next extreme is now we're on the cannibal diet because, you know, we're not plants, so you can't eat plants anymore. You got to eat flesh. That works better for us. Eat meat.
Overpopulation's a problem.
Why eat meat from other species when you can eat meat from your own species? That's what we're designed to eat because that's what we're designed from. And then, like you said, population control. Boom.
That was a book about that. Jonathan Swift put that out, right? Like, control the population by eating all of the babies. I think that's the original satire.
Oh, man, I didn't see that.
He beat you to it. But anyway, let me ask you this, because it must have taken, to some degree, people don't realize that they're trapped in the characters, right? Like, before I interviewed on the show, I'm just like, is this a satirical character? Is this like the real JP? And it's a bit of both. But people, you know, you're switching from, to some degree, short form back to long form again with the podcast, right? With the long form conversations where you can really get into anything. And to me, that's the thing that's missing from the internet conversations between most people, right? Like, maybe because we have internet platforms and whatever, we can do this, but most people don't really have this depth of conversation, certainly not on the internet, because you're trapped in your little avatar. I think that's only going to kind of get worse. We could talk about things now, but they're not going to stay this way with social media. I'm more interested in where they're all going. Virtual reality and immersive realities for people will really be a big thing, especially for kids. I don't really have a specific question about that, but what do you think about where all of this is going?
I think the more we get away from human connection, the worse off we are, period. Yeah. And I'm not, like, that's not me saying, like, oh, virtual reality, we didn't have that when I was a kid, therefore I'm afraid of it. It's like, cool, like, I am indifferent to virtual reality. But what scares me is when virtual reality, social media, constant inundation from alerts on our phones, all of that accumulates to distract us from real human connection, both connection with ourselves and other people. If we're highly connected to ourselves, then virtual reality might enhance our lives. If we are very disconnected from ourselves, then virtual reality will hurt our lives because it disconnects us more. We connect to that instead of being connected to ourselves. So I look at all these things as power potentials. Any power can help or harm.
Yeah.
So with that said, you know, long form conversations like this for me are a gift because we're having a real human connection.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I had the desire to start my podcast. It's like, I need this. I want it for me. Very important human connection. And I get more in touch with myself having real conversations like this because, like, ooh, Abel asked me a question. Now I'm thinking, I never thought that I was thinking this thought, but I am. And it's great. But the fractured reality that most of us live in of, like, oh, a tweet, like 240 characters, 280 characters, like, And that's a long tweet, by the way.
Yeah.
Like that's what we're used to. Or, oh, I scrolled past, 4 seconds on Instagram, and that was a long time to look at something. Or we have an in-person conversation, but just because we're in proximity doesn't mean that we're connected. So
Right.
sometimes our attention spans are such that we only pay attention to each other for 7 seconds. I've heard the average attention span nowadays is 7 seconds.
Yeah.
So without intentional connection, I think our lives will feel more and more empty, less quality, less happiness, less fulfillment. Yet with intentional connection, both to ourselves and other people, I think that's what gives us more fulfillment, more genuine happiness, not gratification of a dopamine hit because, hey, I just looked and there's all my likes on my Instagram. Like, that's not happiness, that's gratification. And so more gratification, more connection, more fulfillment, I think is more genuine happiness is what we need. Whether we're looking for it or not, I think we need it.
So it's interesting because a lot of people believe that we live in a state of progress, I guess you could say, whether it's technological, medical, in terms of intelligence and wisdom about the earth and where we came from, where we're going, all of this. I would love to hear your comment on that. Where are we at in terms of like the collective mind share of everyone on earth right now?
Yeah. At first I'll say, do we live in an age of technical progress? Like, hell yeah. But technical progress doesn't necessarily mean life satisfaction progress. Economic progress doesn't necessarily mean fulfillment progress. So yet on the whole, from my delusional point of view, on the whole of consciousness, life progress, I think we're trending in a good direction.
Yeah.
I really do. A friend of mine, Ty Ward, yesterday shared with me that annually there's $275 billion in the courses industry, people selling online courses. And so much of that is self-development, people wanting to better their lives, in effect, essentially up-level their consciousness. And so the self-help industry right now is booming. And personally, I don't care the economics of the self-help industry, but I think that's a symptom of a good sign that we're trending in a good direction of people care about feeling good nowadays. Again, not feeling good from gratification, but people care about feeling a fulfilled life, feeling a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. And I think we live in an exciting time for that.
Yeah.
A lot of potential for distraction, yet a lot of potential for us to find resources, people, connections to really find meaning and purpose in our lives. So, I might be optimistic, yet I might be realistic, but that's my perspective. And I'm curious your perspective of the same question, where we're at, human consciousness right now.
There are so many moving parts right now, more than ever. You could probably say. Yeah. What we've done to a large extent is insulated ourselves from some of the madness. If you don't need to work behind a desk or in a city, which very fortunately for us, we no longer do, we've chosen not to. So our regular life is much more similar in a lot of ways to how I grew up, which is in the backwoods of New Hampshire, no cable television, 2.5 channels. Dad had to climb up on the roof to switch the antenna around in the snow back in the day. But there was so much time for self-reflection. There was so much time for thinking all of this through and being bored and having that uninterrupted time, which has really gone away. So we've had to fight to get that back, and we do that very much intentionally. And then combine that with what I'm doing now. I'm doing 6 of these interviews today. Each one's about an hour long. And yes, it does take a lot of effort, but I love it. Like you were just saying, I love having deep conversations. It's really awkward at parties. People are like, "Are you interviewing me?" No, I'm just weird. I'm just like this. I love this.
I'm
I love
interested in you. Oh, sorry.
But that's what I would say. We are coming up on time, though, and I want to make sure that I ask you a couple of things. One of them, I think, is more important than ever, is how do you spot a fake guru, especially on the internet these days? Because I feel like you can see most of the people, though, who are watching it, they're like, what? He's the smartest, coolest guy ever.
Man, I think a good question, a fake guru, someone who doesn't share their shadow side, someone who doesn't share their real struggles and challenges, to me is a fake guru, someone who only comes across with the facade of, I've got it figured out. Let me teach you how to.
Right.
If like a real guru, they'll have stuff figured out. They can obviously help you to help yourself. But if they're not also real and authentic enough to be vulnerable, share their struggles, then I want no part of it.
Yeah.
And I think also a characteristic of a fake guru would be someone who comes across with the message that essentially says, I can do it for you. You just need my course, my thing I'm selling. I think call it a real guru is someone who is the mountain guide. Like nobody's going to climb the mountain of your self-development for you, yet having a mountain guide who can help you navigate the mountain of your life, to me, is the hallmark of a real guru, someone who doesn't really help people, but they help people to help themselves.
Yeah.
But, to me, it disempowers people when there's the marketing model that says, I can do it for you, because that means I'm taking your power. I need you to believe you are disempowered to the point of needing me and my empowerment. So I think it actually disempowers people more, hence a fake guru. Whereas a real guru, I think, gives us our power back. It helps us give ourselves our power back, honestly. What
about spirituality as a status symbol these days? Because that seems to be more true than ever, doesn't it?
Yeah, I get amused by that. Of course, we use spirituality as their status symbol. And I mean, for crying out loud, I've got this big, stupid purple amethyst rock on my desk. Status symbol.
Much bigger than mine.
Oh, yeah. It's way more advanced than you, Abel.
By the way, I heard Buddha was very attached to your new book.
When I helped the Buddha get unattached to his idea of unattachment, and then he got very attached to my book because he learned it from my book.
That's very helpful.
Spirituality is a status symbol. Of course it happens. Here's my mala beads, bro. And, all the look and the fashion. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Yet I think if we know we're doing it, if we know we're some part of us is trying to gain a sense of significance through our spiritual status, then we lose ourselves less to it. But if we're trying to gain a sense of significance through our spiritual status but don't know it, then I dare say we're probably losing ourselves to it.
What about abusing psychedelics really, really hard? Is that up-leveling your spirituality? Because that's pretty trendy these days too, especially synthetic psychedelics somehow.
It's very trendy, and it is something that I have concern about. Where people use a quote unquote sacred substance and they can start to use it in an addictive, compulsive way where they treat it like a crutch. And in other words, they might be, let's just say it's a sacred substance. They start using the sacred substance in a very unsacred way, yet they rationalize, I'm doing it in a sacred way because it's a sacred substance. So if you don't see the potential shadow side, then I dare say you don't see it probably because you're in it. And then I think, if someone's using it as a crutch, then it's disempowering them. If it's like, it's the weekend, I got to do ayahuasca again because, that's where I get connected. Well, maybe you're actually weakening your legs by relying on the crutch too much. And I think all these things are tools. And I think a tool has its constructive benefits when we use it at the right times and don't use it at the wrong times.
Right.
of the time, the carpenter isn't whacking stuff with the hammer.
Mm-hmm.
If he or she was, there'd be a lot of destruction. And the last quick opinionated thing I have to say about that is, at times I've seen people who are very addicted to psychedelic substances lecture me about how unaddictive these substances are. They'll say, there's no addictive properties in this, so use it like all day, every day, and I do, and I'm not addicted. Well, you know what? Gambling doesn't have chemically addictive properties to it either. Mm-hmm. And people get tremendously addicted to gambling, which has no addictive properties to it. So we can get very psychologically addicted to gambling, and we can get very psychologically addicted to psychedelic substances. So, you know, it's kind of like the Lord of the Rings. There's great power in it. And as Spider-Man's uncle would tell him, with great power comes great responsibility. And if you are your own shaman, you're probably trashing yourself, just to state it bluntly.
I don't have a ton of experience, but we did go down to Peru and went through a number of ceremonies there, and it was not recreational at all. It was not something that I wanted a whole lot more of right now. It's not. The idea, and this kind of came down to me from some of my teachers, is that if you are going to experiment with those sorts of things, then the idea is that maybe you experience that, you make a little bookmark in your mind, you go through those experiences, you deal with it, you reintegrate, with the goal being that you can do the same thing without any substances later. You can do that just going on a walk or in a sitting meditation or throughout your day-to-day life. That's the goal. It's not to be loaded up on psychedelics all the time. Yeah,
absolutely. What I heard you say, and I love it, Abel, if you use a psychedelic as a bookmark to, teach yourself what a connection to Earth or Mother Nature or God, teach you what that's like so you can find it without the substance. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why a crutch used in an appropriate way essentially teaches your weak leg how to walk again. Yeah. So the crutch teaches you how to not need the crutch anymore. But if you say, well, it's easier to walk with a crutch, I'll keep walking with a crutch, you actually make your own legs weaker. So, yeah, I think there's great benefit to the substances, and I think there's great detriment. I think it depends on us.
Yeah. Well, I love that, JP. We could talk all day, but we do have to go. So before we do, please tell folks a little bit about your work, where they can find you, and your new book, and anything else you're working on.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Abel. My work, it's all about conscious comedy. So you can check out my YouTube channel, Awaken with JP. I'm Awaken with JP across all the social medias. And I'm super passionate about my new podcast, the Awaken with JP Sears show. It's in all the podcast places. Feel free to check that out if you'd like. And of course, my book you mentioned came out last year. It's a parody book on the New Age spiritual culture. It's called How to Be Ultra Spiritual, 12 and a half Steps to Spiritual Superiority.
It is a great book to read. I had quite a few giggles, JP. I really appreciate your work. Thanks once again for coming on the show. I'll have to invite you back because we could talk all day.
I'd love to, Abel. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for doing your work in the world, my friend. You're a bright, shining light.
Hey there, listener. Thanks so much for listening to the very end of this episode. As a special bonus, I'm including a new original song that I made up just for you, live on the spot, as part of my new improv music video series. I hope you like it. You can check out hundreds of these original songs and more for free at abeljames.com. Here we go.
The American dream. The American dream. The American dream. The American dream. It's not what it seems. It's not what it seems. What it seems. It's not 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 what it seems. Americans are Americans. It's not what it It's not what it seems. The American dream. It's not what it seems. 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 It's not what it seems.
This episode is brought to you by listeners like you and Future Greens. You want my number one health tip right now? Get your greens in every single day. I've been getting my greens on every day for coming up on, well, almost every day, let's be honest, for coming up on almost 10 years now, and I believe it makes a monumental difference to my health, performance, and overall well-being. Why? Well, most of us eat too many acidic foods like meat, dairy, or sugar and other junk carbs, leading to an unbalanced pH level in the body and more than our fair share of toxins. I don't know if you've ever tried greens supplements, but most of them taste terrible, like fish tank. And if it doesn't taste good, I won't drink it, no matter how good it is for me, especially if you're talking every day. There are tons of supplements out there packed with cheap fats, sugar, fillers, and caffeine, but we have a much better option if you're looking to increase your energy and your health. So when Allison and I are on the road, we always take Future Greens. Future Greens is a concentrated superfood powder made from 15 organic fruits and vegetables, plus 6 additional superfoods, as well as digestive enzymes. So in less than 60 seconds, you can get the nutrition of over 20 fruits, veggies, and adaptogens, all with less than 1 gram of sugar. Future Greens is packed with vitamins, minerals, and filling prebiotic fiber from whole, organic veggies, sprouts, algae, and berries, including kale, beet, parsley, collard greens, cauliflower sprouts, broccoli sprouts, spirulina, chlorella, blueberries, raspberries, and much more. Imagine the time and expense it would take you to buy and prepare all those foods separately. Trust us, we've tried, and Future Greens makes it a heck of a lot easier. Our ingredients are harvested at peak freshness and potency and immediately concentrated and dried using cool temperature processes that preserve the energetic and nutritional integrity of all the ingredients. Whether you're looking to strengthen your immunity, cleanse your system of toxins, alkalize your body, diversify your diet, or boost your energy without caffeine, Future Greens is your new best friend. And as a listener of Fat Burning Man, you can get a 20% discount to try Future Greens yourself. So to get Future Greens from Wild Superfoods and your special Fat Burning Man deal, just visit fatburningman.com/greens to get 20% off when you subscribe and save. On top of that, you'll get an extra bonus that I can't even tell you about right now, but just visit fatburningman.com/greens. We'll see you there. Well, hey there, listener. This is Abel one more time, and I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Fat Burning Man Show. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you might be listening to or watching this show right now. And if you have a second, please leave me a quick review for the Fat Burning Man Show. I read every single one of them, and every time you leave a review, it gives us a little boost in the rankings, and that helps other people find this show. And if you can think of someone else who might enjoy and benefit from this free show, please take a second to share it with a friend or a family member. And if they're like, what is this Fat Burning Man thing? That's a really silly name. You could be like, you're right, but here's the deal. We've recorded over 250 episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show with thought leaders in health from all over the world. And so far, we've won 4 awards, hitting #1 in health in more than 8 countries internationally. We have more than 30 million downloads already, but we're just getting started. I can't believe any of this, by the way, and couldn't do any of this without you. So thanks once again. But here's some more good news. You can download and listen to every single episode of the Fat Burning Man Show for free with 0 outside advertisements, no outside sponsors, and no corporate overlords. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com. We'll give you a second here just to type it in, fatburningman.com. And you'll get all the show notes, transcripts, and video and audio versions for all the past episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show for free. Better yet, enter your email at fatburningman.com, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll even send you a quick start guide so you can take your health into your own hands right now, along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes as a special thanks for signing up. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now, enter your best email to get your free goodies with a bonus surprise straight to your inbox. This is Abel James signing off. Thank you so much for listening once again, and have a great week.